Hello everyone, I'm the Weather Dude, welcome back, and today's video is going to be an exciting one. It's pretty much getting around to springtime, and so we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 hurricane season forecast, my first outlook. There will be a forecast provided at the end of this video as well, so be sure to stay tuned. And of course, be sure to hit that subscribe button, as surprisingly 97% of you are still not subscribed. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So the purpose of today's video is just to get our first look into the 2024 hurricane season. And like I just said, there will be a forecast provided by me at the end of the video, right? But just going to be taking a preliminary look at things, kind of looking at some early indicators that could point to, or tell us, what the season could possibly look like. I'm not going to read them all out, but you can see on your screen now is a list of the names for this hurricane season, just to give you an idea of what they are. And if we look here at the ENSO, the alert system status, right? So this pretty much tells us where we are in the ENSO region, right? It's, remember that area in it's kind of like the central tropical Pacific that kind of tells us, right, how hurricane season or even winter season could look based on whether the waters are warmer or colder. So right now we have an El Nino advisory, right? Because there's an El Nino out there right now. Kind of like when you have a winter weather advisory, that kind of means winter weather is around the corner. Well, it's the same thing with El Nino, right? There's an El Nino advisory, meaning that El Nino conditions are pretty much present right now, but there is also a La Nina watch. Right, so that means in the future we could see conditions kind of switch over to La Nina. Right, so a transition into our ENSO neutral phase, which is in between the two, right, is likely by between April and June, so kind of like that later springtime. There's a 79% chance of that, with increasing odds of La Nina developing June through August, with a 55% chance of it happening in that time frame. And you're going to see this with other maps we look at too. If it doesn't happen, like La Nina by August, it'll probably be here by September or October. But it's looking like over the summer, there is a greater than 50% chance that we could get to a La Nina. Right, so here's the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, right? It's kind of just a bunch of ensemble members kind of looking at where we could be headed here in terms of our Nino 3-4 region. Again, this, among several other factors that we're going to talk about in this video, are key to determining what the hurricane season could look like. So here we are up here in El Nino right now. Again, by May, June, sometime in there, right? By later spring, we're going to drop into ENSO neutral, or at least that's what's in the forecast. Right? And you can see we're just going to kind of just trend downward from there. So they actually don't have us getting to La Nina. Now, again, as I've said in like the last couple years when I've done these hurricane videos, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, they use different parameters for determining El Nino and La Nina. They use 0.8. And we use 0.5, right? Go both positive and negative. So they do determine things a little bit differently, but still very similar message here at what they're conveying. And they're pretty much saying we're going to stay in an ENSO neutral phase, right? And of course, some ensemble members go more towards La Nina, some stay towards El Nino, right? But the consensus is that we're going to stay in an ENSO neutral, kind of just hitting that zero line here by the time we head into the month of August. All right, so let's look here at May. Right, so it's just kind of like a compilation of like a few of their main models that they kind of use, right, and then the average of those. So again, a lot of the models by May, right, essentially all of them are in an ENSO neutral phase, with the average of them being about 0.2, which is again in that ENSO neutral territory. By June, however, there are a couple models, especially the CanSIPS is getting pretty close, and the NOAA model is like into La Nina at this point. So they're kind of going, we're going all in on the La Nina there. And then by July, I mean, both the CanSIPS and the NOAA models are there. UKMO is almost there, right? And you can see a negative 0.4. So essentially creeping up on, at least in the average of these like 7 models, creeping in on that La Nina territory. And if it goes back to La Nina, or even ENSO neutral, but especially La Nina, this hurricane season, we could see things take a pretty drastic turn. This map, I will just leave this here. This was when I was like setting up this video, I was looking through all the maps to prepare for this, and I saw this. This is alarming, right? Because I mean, during the winter time, to be honest, I don't pay attention to sea surface temperatures that much. It's more, I pay attention more when it's hurricane season, right? I mean, yes, it does matter for like coastal storms and nor'easters and stuff, but I really start to pay attention during hurricane season. But wow, I mean, the Gulf of Mexico, right? The Caribbean, and especially the East Tropical Atlantic, all are astoundingly above average right now. And that's not to say they're warm, and some of these areas are warm, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're warm. They're just a lot warmer than average. And that means, the sea surface temperatures, they're ahead of the game. right? And this is only going to spell trouble for this hurricane season, especially out here. I mean, between 2 and 3 degrees Celsius above average out in the MDR, as we call the main development region, the East Tropical Atlantic. Even the Caribbean is between 1 and 2 degrees Celsius above average. Same with the Gulf of Mexico, with some spots even closing in on 3 degrees Celsius above average. So that is certainly quite significant there. If we take a look here at the sea surface temperatures, like the actual sea surface temperatures, if we look at the actual sea surface temperatures, you can see like the yellow region kind of represents 25 degrees Celsius. So in Fahrenheit translation, that's about 77 degrees or so. And you can see it's getting pretty far north. Like I'm going to show you some closer views in just a second of a different map. But you can see, I mean, 77 degrees plus kind of going up the Gulf Stream here off the coast of Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas already. So the fact that it's early March and it's already getting to that point is kind of insane, right? And of course, Central Gulf of Mexico, which as I have also said in the past couple of years, I've been doing these types of videos, is because of the current that comes out in the Gulf Stream, kind of does a little loop like this, the Gulf Stream current, right? So that kind of keeps the central, that's why the Central Gulf of Mexico is always warmer, but still getting pretty far north already with these 77 plus degree water temperatures. Same with the Tropical Atlantic, we're already pretty much getting there. Okay, here are some of these closer up examples I was talking about. So these are from windy.com, and you can see off the coast of Florida, right, like the area I was showing you, off the coast of the Carolinas, all right, 79 degrees sea surface temperatures. Now, again, I know that's just a pin, but you can go on this website yourself and literally move the pin up and down. It's pretty much 77 to 79 in this entire region, which I know is the Gulf Stream, but is still astoundingly warm. I mean, like the peak of hurricane season, usually the waters get their warmest in the basin around September or so. The Gulf Stream doesn't get much warmer than that. I mean, it usually gets like the low mid 80s, but it only goes up a few more degrees from here. So we're already getting close. And the other area here that we are looking at is in the Central Gulf of Mexico. You can see also about 79, closing in on 80 degrees Fahrenheit in terms of our sea surface temperatures. Just so you know, in the Caribbean, it's already between like 81, 82, right? It usually, to be fair, the Caribbean usually stays around 79 or 80 at least all year, right? So, but that said, it's still, like I showed you in the anomaly map, all these areas, the Gulf of Mexico, the North Atlantic, especially the East Tropical Atlantic, the Caribbean, all are above average and by a lot for the sea surface temperatures. So that's kind of the first bad sign. Saharan air layer, this kind of measures the dust in the basin. Of course, more dust hurts it's kind of like dry air, so it kind of hurts the hurricane or the hypothetical hurricane that would form. Again, it's March. This is supposed to look like this. You might think, oh, there's going to be no hurricanes, you know. This is typical for March. I mean, I just kind of wanted to kind of show you the maps so you can kind of see as they update in the coming months what they could look like. Right, this is kind of just like our preliminary outlook here. But I mean, there are some areas, right, at times that could see a little more of a break in the action. All right, but in general, there's a lot of Saharan dust over the Atlantic Basin, and that's probably going to stay that way for at least the next month or two. Right. Now, here is the 200 HPA. I really actually don't really know the name of the map. They're called the CHI. I actually don't know what it's abbreviated for. But this map essentially kind of takes a look at the convection, right? So essentially the oranges and reds are kind of less convection, and the greens are increased amounts of convection, right? So of course that's the setup that you need to get these tropical systems, right? Is increased. This isn't necessarily, this is increased moisture, but it's increased amounts of thunderstorms that could form, right? If you're in those kind of green zones. So everything kind of progresses west to east, right, over time, right? So you can see, and I believe these are 5-day intervals, right? Kind of going out about 40 days or so. So this takes us to the end of April pretty much, or mid to end of April. And you can see these greens will eventually move, right? Because everything's a pattern in weather, everything's connected, right? So everything's moving to the east. So by the time that we get to April, right? So before you can see, the Caribbean, right, and the East Tropical Atlantic all, at least through like the end of the month, less convection, right? But look what happens towards April. We start to see some light greens and some whites, right? So either average or even slightly above average convection over northern South America, especially. Right? So, and we have seen instances of convection kind of like emerging off South America and forming into tropical systems, although it's kind of rare. But do note that the Caribbean kind of goes into more of a white color, all right? And then we go to the end of April, and then it kind of just goes back. So that could mean, again, in this period of time in April, we could see increased convection. And just keep in mind that April is not, not unheard of to see tropical systems forming in April. I'm not saying it's going to happen because of this. But also another area to keep an eye on is Western Africa, because, again, this is more of a later in hurricane season thing, but eventually, right, these tropical systems will roll off the coast of Africa, right, their monsoon season. And now that increased moisture there could help hurricane activity as well. All things to keep an eye on. The next thing here is wind shear. Again, it's March. This is supposed to look like this. We got months to go before the wind shear map might start to go, the wind shear would lessen a little bit, if you will, in the coming months. But for right now, although it has been dropping over the central Atlantic, especially in this zone here, by as much as 10, 20, 30 knots in the past 24 hours, it's still going to be high, very typical for this time of year. Right here is a look at where we typically see tropical development in the month of June. Typically, we see development kind of start to form in the Caribbean, right, and then it kind of moves into the Gulf of Mexico, either from the west to the east, right, kind of this little zone here, especially that we could see more likely to see tropical storms forming in June. But it's pretty much a Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, East Coast kind of setup here is what it's typical for the month of June, not always. So now let's get into some of the more forecasting. We got some more models coming up here. So you can see pretty much, February, March, we're in an El Nino, so obviously 100% chance. Now the tables flip fast. I've never seen the bars, like the bars are this high, right? This close together. Like usually, right, like we'll see El Nino, like we'll see it drop down from 100 to 80 to 70 to 60, and maybe we'll see a La Nina increase from 10 to 20, but this is going really fast. April, we have a 70, I would say it's about a 75, it's where it's at, 75% chance of El Nino, right? And then we flip over to May, and it goes from 75% chance of El Nino to about a 79% chance of ENSO neutral. Like that flips so fast. You can see, look, here is the ENSO neutral. I'll get rid of these. ENSO neutral for April, May, right? And then here's El Nino chances for April, and then May. They completely flip-flop. So that tells me that things are going to be turning around pretty fast. Like I said, later springtime, meteorological spring just started March 1st, right? Of course, seasonal spring is kind of in a couple weeks or so, about a week and a half. But as we head into the later part of spring, April, May, this is when we're going to see the tables flip. At least that's what's being forecasted right now. And even, right, so we still see ENSO neutral hold on, right, 68 or so % chance in June, but then look at July. We see a greater than 50% chance of La Nina. August, it goes up to about 68%, 73% by September, and even a 76% chance or so by October. And so we can see La Nina take over. And either way, ENSO neutral and La Ninas both can yield significant hurricane seasons. One ENSO neutral year that comes to mind that was really active was 2004. I believe 2005 was a La Nina year, but I do know 2004 was ENSO neutral, and that was still a very active hurricane season. Even 2023, under an El Nino, we still had 20 named storms, and we had an average amount, 7 hurricanes, and an average amount of 3 major hurricanes. We had 20 named storms, even in an El Nino, so you could see a pretty active hurricane season this year, especially if the tables flip back in the other direction. So here's the CFS model forecasting, right? So it's kind of like an ensemble, kind of just a combination of some of their model runs. Right? And as you can see here, again, right around 2 degrees or so Celsius above average, right? That's kind of like where we were, kind of like the stronger, moderate to strong El Nino. But you can see how that started to come down over the last couple of months, right, to about 1.5 according to this particular chart here. And then it's going to continue going down. Their forecast, the CFS, is kind of by April, May, again, kind of like what we were saying before. We're in that ENSO neutral zone. Here's the La Nina line. Now, I've said this before, again, many times as well. Just because you break the, let's say you're going down, right? So let's say we're at negative 0.5. This is the La Nina threshold, this black line here. Just because you break it doesn't necessarily mean that we're in a La Nina, right? It's not like if we hit negative 0.5, we're instantly in a La Nina. Not necessarily, because it could always bounce back. So it needs to stay there. I do not believe there's any specific criteria, but the general consensus, it needs to stay there for at least a couple or few months or so, right, for it to be, an official La Nina, so they can actually see that the sea surface temperatures are going to stay at this region for a longer period of time. But either way, we do break that La Nina threshold by late May into June, and by second half of summer, we're in a La Nina for sure. At least according to this model. I'm not saying we're going to be, but this model has high confidence in it, the CFS forecasting. These are some other model predictions, all right? So you can kind of see, again, where we are right now. Now, they actually predict these group of models, and there's really no middle line, right? There's no line of best fit, if you will. But a general consensus of the models kind of states that we'll be in a La Nina kind of around July or so. They will kind of hit that threshold. So again, it's probably going to be a second half of summer thing. So second half of spring, right? Later spring will probably be in an ENSO neutral. That's when we'll flip over to that. And then later in summer, second half of summer, will be most likely as of now when we'll switch into a La Nina for our Atlantic basin here. And of course, this has implications on the Pacific basin as well. But if we look here at these are just kind of going back like 10 years, and you can actually on the NOAA presentation that they have on this, you can actually click a link and go back to like the 50s. But this is just the last 12 years or so. Kind of looking at the Nino 3-4 region, the sea surface temperature anomalies. So you can see throughout 2023, we were in an El Nino. It was climbing throughout the summer, right? We peaked at around 2 in December. Now there has been, right, a fall to 1.8. So we'll see, and this is January's data. So February and March, they're kind of slow to come out with these. Right, but generally speaking, right, like if you look, right, typically they kind of move in trends. So see, like it's tracking up for a long period of time in 2015 before coming down in 2016. So my point is they don't really fluctuate very much. It's not like it goes from 0.9 to 0.2 and then back up to 0.9. So generally, if it's trending in one direction, it'll probably stay in that direction for a little while. Now I say typically because there are exceptions to this, right? Like in 2021, we went to negative 0.5, then negative 0.4, and then back up to 0.5. So there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, right, there was an upward trend, 2022 into 2023, but that seems to be reversing into 2024. Okay, so that was January's data, 1.8 above average. Here's another graphic showing that the Nino 3-4 region was in fact at 1.4 in the latest weekly departures, and this was actually kind of released today. So again, there's your Nino 3-4 region in the Pacific, kind of in the central Pacific there, kind of on the equator. So 1.4 is a significant drop, right? And we're getting down to ENSO neutral pretty fast. And if we look on Tropical Tidbits, you can look at their CDAS outlook. They actually, there was actually kind of a drop in the last week or so. So they actually have it at only 1 degree above average right now, which would pretty much put us in a weaker El Nino. So it's really been trending down, especially since January. So you can kind of see that trend line. Right, if we want to drag it back to December, here's kind of like we can actually draw a trend line real quick. If you draw it from here to here. So yeah, it's went from about 1.5 to about 1. So pretty much an average drop of about negative 0.5, or a drop of 0.5, I should say, from kind of like early December till now. So again, a steady drop, and that shows we're trending in the ENSO neutral direction. So to finalize this video here is my first outlook on the hurricane season. So we're going to kind of go from left to right here. The average number of named storms in a hurricane season is 14. We usually have 7 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes. Last hurricane season, we saw 20 named storms, again, despite the El Nino. 7 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes, so these two were kind of on par. Now, the weather bell forecast about this, when I was looking, right, I was looking for other sources just to see if, they released their predictions yet. This one kind of got me by surprise because I thought this was clickbait, and I went on Weather Bell's website, and it was not. Right? And they're known for a lot of their meteorological data, right? And so they actually predict, quote unquote, the hurricane season from hell. So they actually are predicting 25 to 30 named storms, 14 to 16 hurricanes. All right. So essentially double the amount of named storms, double the amount of hurricanes, and double the amount of major hurricanes, 6 to 8. Right. And we're going to release other sources as they come out, right? I'm not withholding them from you. Once other sources start to release, usually April is when a lot of weather news sites kind of give their first preliminary outlook. So we'll wait on that. But it was good to get a preliminary discussion out to you guys. But my forecast is just pretty much just based on the data I've seen, plus kind of like what I'm feeling could happen so far 15 to 18 named storms, 7 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 5 major hurricanes. So this is kind of similar to my initial thoughts of the 2023 season, maybe a little bit more buff than that, but I think we're probably going to end up being a little bit more active than 2023. And if we don't hit 20 named storms, there could still be a possibility to see more than 7 hurricanes and more than 3 major hurricanes, right? Because the 2023 season, because of El Nino, right, it kind of hindered the development of a lot of storms, but there was still a lot of moisture, there was still a lot of convection. So a lot of these named storms were able to form, but not a lot of them were able to become hurricanes or major hurricanes because of El Nino, because of wind shear and the like. So that's why we saw like a pretty far above average number of named storms, but only an average amount of hurricanes and major hurricanes. But if, again, it trends in the ENSO neutral or lining in direction as it's continuing to, my forecast could certainly, or even worst case scenario, even Weather Bell's forecast could potentially hold. But we'll wait as the more news sites kind of start to release their data. All right, that's going to conclude it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Of course, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell notifications so you don't miss any future videos. And of course, with the hurricane season, I hope for there to be plenty of them. Exciting to get back into the hurricane season spirit. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.